Коллеги,
Dear colleagues, continuing the subject on the subject of translators training, we have mentioned that our key challenges are as follows: to have the main one is to have trainers who those who know how to train translators. If the translators are motivated, then we will overcome the challenge. And I'm happy to invite a speaker who's unique, who has set up has created a phenomenon that has no analogues in the territory, at least of the post-Soviet, of the former Soviet Union. This is Irina Alekseeva and Saint-Petersburg High School of Translation and Interpreting.
Она же сейчас еще пить. I want to apologize that my presentation is not very colorful as the previous one. That's what was done on purpose. I will talk about my school, and then my presentation will be more colorful. So, that's a gift from our distant city. That's a view where you can see the Cathedral of Saint Isaac, and there is my school situated at such a distance. In reality, to discuss the issue as it has been formulated, training for trainers, how to prepare teachers of translation. We need to understand who the teachers of translation is. Of course, we are going to discuss ideal picture today, but some of its limits have been already set by two previous reporters. That's why it's easier for me to talk on the basis of the aforementioned things about the gap, about the information we know, the problems of teaching translation in higher educational institutions. Of course, I will base upon the information I know about teaching, because I've been teaching translation since 1980, for 34 years already. My scientific advisor gave me the discipline. Andrei Benediktovich Fedorov, a great teacher, one of the founders of the Russian theory of translation, he gave me all his practical and theoretical course. It's necessary to understand that during the Soviet times and in 1980 in particular, there wasn't any theory of translation and the concept of translation at all. There wasn't even the profession of translators. That's why Fedorov very literally implemented practical translation where the language was taught and imposed theory of translation as an essential course. That's what I got. In addition, I got the faculty of additional preparation. I didn't have enough teaching experience. I've had then 6 years of translation experience. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I graduated the University of Leningrad in 1975, and I began working as a translator when I was a fourth-year student in the patent bureau. It is quite a good job. If you saw what patent is, you understand what I'm talking about. Since 1980, I entered the seminar under the Alliance of Writers, and I began engaged in doing Bella letter translation. As all shy people, I had great ambitions, and I translated Goethe and Heine and some greatest writers as well. For example, Hermann Hesse. I used to translate them. So when I got all this and I got all this to teach, I've got little experience. And how to combine teaching experience and translation experience. In 1980s, my specialization was written translation in medicine and judicial sphere. My first language is German, and by the end of 1980s, I was also translating into German. Translators know that it's difficult and it's illegal even. I used to translate even philosophy of law into German, and I translated operation, medical operation, surgery operation. I began doing oral translation, and since 1990 I'm conference interpreter, and since 1995 I was doing conference simultaneous interpretation. At the same time, I was teaching at the university, and in 1998, it seemed to me that the gap mentioned by the previous speakers, this gap was somehow implemented into the educational system, and it resulted in the gap with practice. It seemed to me that I've got an idea how to mend this gap. Then I began teaching different courses, additional courses. I began implement my own programs on teaching translation. So I began to collect experience on how to teach and how to implement ways of teaching, and it was since 1998. I've got lots of students, up to 300 people in a group. It is a large scale of experience and large scale of what I got. Of course, they were kind of laboratory rabbits, but there was no other way, because situation in Russia was like that. Suddenly, in 1998, there was a kind of recommendation to teach translators in all higher educational institutions. Now, 290 institutions teach translators. According to standard program, standardized program, and there appeared an urgent need, because the higher educational institutions needed to do it, but they didn't know how to do it, and they needed to speak on how to teach and how to do it. That was the beginning, worth mentioning further. That's why I had such a period first of obtaining a large methodical experience in different methodological program. And I was teaching translation in 11 different places on only practice of translation, and I tried to redo the theory of translation and to make it as my own approach. Finally, I got an idea of all aspects necessary to do the process of teaching and translation more feasible. One of the fundamentals in this process is the person who teaches. Since 1998, when I began meeting students in 12 places of Russia, different places of Russia a year, I visited lots of higher educational institutions, and we discussed how to organize the education of translators. It turned out that there is nothing more difficult than to get the teacher of translation who will be effective and efficient. Everything else was simpler, much more simpler. To organize practice, to organize internships, to organize methodology and standards, everything possible. The most difficult thing was to organize, to get the appropriate teacher of translation. Why? I think that the situation with this sphere is the same as in any professional sphere, because the educational institutions, for some reason, are not sure in teaching the specialist fully detached from the profession. I think that it's much more feasible thing if the person who teaches the profession would teach his would-be colleagues in profession. I'm talking not about the translation, I'm talking in general, about any reasonable sphere. That doesn't mean full cancellation of university education. Traditions are good as usual. I think that for every profession there should be some place or some branch according to which after any cases would-be colleagues would be teaching in their sphere. In our case, these are translation teachers. These are translators. I tried to do that. I'm not ready now to share experience of how to make a qualified translation teacher out of every teacher. It's not effective, I think. I think that the only effective way, as I thought it, I know it for sure now, it is to teach teaching skills to translators. As far as other ways are concerned, I will tell that it is necessary for higher educational institution teachers to teach translation, and for that they need to be translators. One time I created a group of teachers of translation who got translation experience, and after that they began teaching translation. It's not moral to teach translation if you don't have any translation experience. That's why we will address now some features of a possible teacher of translation. The first is that a teacher should be a translator or an interpreter. There are some moments to support this statement. These are just statements. I will show you some documents, I will cite some information connected with it, but these statements are the basic ones. It's most difficult thing to turn into the teacher of translation for the teacher of language. That was my experience. I worked as a teacher and I got lots of obstacles possible for that. I won't recommend anyone to follow that way. Teachers of language, according to their mentality and upbringing, cannot be translators until they switched on to translation completely. That's why they need translation experience. Why it is more difficult for the teachers of language? Because language and translation are dramatically different, but they have similar materials. The presence of similar material makes the situation almost unsolvable. It's not correct that if you know language you can translate, or if you know language well you can translate well. For the teacher of translation, there is an incorrect idea of how he or she knows the language, because he doesn't work with the language. It's worth mentioning to speak that the teacher of translation should bear some kind of ideas about language. I think the teacher of language should take into account that they teach a linguist. It is not a task for a teacher of translation to master the source language or a target language. Their task is to master language skills, language knowledge, and other things. For a teacher of language, it is necessary to show to the would-be translators the correlation of grammar system between languages. It's not difficult, taking into consideration our methodological approach. It is necessary to give some ideas about phonetics and stylistics and different styles of speech, and use not only communicative methods of teaching, about styles of speech. This is not the task of the teacher of translation to give this information. This is the task of a teacher of language. It is necessary to give some basic idea about some ethical categories. For the teacher of translation, then, to make the process of teaching much more easier. Of course, this is not all, but the main thing is not to interfere with the teaching of translation. Now, the teacher which is at the same time translator. Of course, I understand that not every translator wants to be a teacher. Moreover, when I see that lots of teachers are underpaid, I don't think that some translator would want to be a teacher and would want to engage himself or herself with this bureaucracy. But there are some translators who realize that for somebody it's necessary to prepare those people who would work in this sphere in the future. Of course, some translators don't want to share their experience, but they are interested in long-lasting profession and in the image of profession and in the fact that the representatives of profession should have some basis to protect their rights. That's why they don't need any foolish people coming from nowhere, and they need some more new, young stuff. Of such translators in that case, want to be engaged in the process of teaching. When I began forming my teaching staff for my school, I don't have teachers. I don't have teachers with teacher's diploma. Of course, some of them have, but they don't have teaching experience. When I began forming my staff, I came across such a situation. Translators, as you know, these are people who have adequate self-esteem. That's quite normal. That's an impetus for development. It's quite good. It's better than if you have low self-esteem. So the translators, when you tell them, okay, let's go and translate, please. The translators say, I cannot teach, I have never done this, I won't be able to do this, and cannot do anything, and that's all. That's not true, because if they succeeded in one thing, they will succeed in another sphere. After that, a process of forming a teacher from a translator begins. That was a situation for us, and now in that list there are such stages and aspects which are needed for formation of a translator out of a teacher. It is based on our experience, and these stages have been undergone by our teacher. This is a result. This is the way to be passed by our teachers who succeed in teaching interpreters and translators. And I'm proud to tell that the graduates of our school 100% work in the professional sphere, and they have a higher level of qualification. And that means they have undergone all professional stages, and they learned it in a very short time. Let's talk about why the teacher should be a translator, for you not to have any doubts and any questions. The question might appear on the basis of life experience, because universities make language teachers to teach translation. It's necessary to refuse from such practice. The main thing for me, and the main sorrowful thing for me, because I saw it from my colleagues and friends, when the moment comes when the teacher of translation is necessary to be said, how it's necessary to translate.
And that's the reason the transformations are like that. We have to translate like this. And there's another way. If you are a good practitioner, and if you have a reputation, then by training with by being taught with a master who has been in the business since ancient times, it still exists. So if young people trust you, and if you tell if you're a practitioner, you can always advise how the students have to translate. If you're a teacher with rather than practitioner, they can imagine will offer the most unconventional and unusual and strange versions for translation, and that's how we get graduates who do not know anything about styles, who do not know anything about types of text, and who do not know how to work with text. And it's in order to answer these questions that we need translators who are practitioners, who have practiced the profession. And in some cases, you can say, okay, I don't have the experience here, and let's do that together. It's only a translation professor can do. Speaking about the second point, the professor has to have worked with where the students will work. If you are a translator, if you are practicing, then it's not so difficult. If you are a teacher, then you will get the specifics that you lack. Generalism is not always good. At some point, you have to specify to clarify and specify what you're talking about. And this is from my own experience. You may think that this only happens here and not and never again, but in fact, I did that specifically because this makes teaching more efficient, because my school trains international translators, and because we mainly work under the aegis of the Memorandum of the UN and the Memorandum with the European Parliament, and we work with the International Affairs Ministry without a memorandum. That's where our graduates will work, and they will also work in the International Monetary Fund and the WHO and so on. The teachers have to know the specifics. That's why the teachers, after passing the exams, the selection exam, just note we have our teachers take a selection exam, and they're of course high-class translators and interpreters, and they will pass that. They get contracts in Geneva and Vienna as UN interpreters. We have internships in the European Parliament. We have internships in the Civil Aviation Agency. Our teachers work as interpreters and translators in these agencies. It's there that they gain the experience that they need to teach the students in an appropriate way. Now, speaking about the methods, let's pass over to the methods, because it's very important for a teacher. The methods are such a nice thing, because we cannot, because this is something that is not documented, because the methods do exist, but they are elusive, practically imperceptible. There are regulations, there are quality criteria, but documented methods do not exist. But this might be a strong point as well, because for an adequate translation interpreting teacher, this is a strong point. This is an advantage, because when we were talking about, we have been talking about the limits, the scope for being of what a translation interpreting teacher is. But now we will be talking about specifics. From now on, starting from item 3, we realize that today a translation professor is a professor, just like a professor in any other sphere, has to work a lot, has to work much more than they worked in the Soviet time. Maybe in Ukraine, all teachers work from day to night, but in Russia, teachers mainly do nothing from day to night, and for them, 10 double periods a week is some kind of overload that they have, that they find hard to bear. But the teacher work. We have talked about the teacher at the stage of teacher formation as a teacher, and the stage when they work as teachers. When the teacher, employ the teacher for the first 6 months, they learn other people's methods and methods that their colleagues use, and only after that I allow them to work with the students. We do have invited professors who we can teach and cannot teach in advance, but this is a normal practice. What happens is they learn the methods from other teachers. There's literature, there's different literature with the normal and abnormal recommendations, but the main thing is that there are quite a few good schools that develop methodology in the world. The first being ISIT in Paris, because they started working on their methods back in the 1950s, soon after they were set up. there's a very strong Anglo-Saxon school with a lot of different branches. There's Bath, a school in Bath with a very good methods. There's the University, the Monterey International Relations University, with their own very unique view of methodology. What the would-be teacher of translation and interpreting needs to know is all these various methods, how they teach in different places, and they shouldn't think and they shouldn't have it in their minds, even though considering our previous practice, we do have in our minds that there can be no single methodology that is the most efficient. It's only the pluralism that is efficient. When there are a lot of methods, but you have to think on them, you have to master them, and you have to use this as the basis to revisit your own experience, to revisit your own experience as a translator and interpreter. First of all, we have to think how I overcome difficulties, different kinds of difficulties, what practical cases I've had in my practice. This doesn't mean that the teacher has to turn their classes into a number of tales on how they have worked. They have to make to-dos, to make conclusions, and that's and it's only after this precedent stage that they will go to the next stage. But they have to build on their own practice and the experience of their colleagues. And they have to do that to build their own system. The principles and the base, as for the basis of the system, the basis has to be uniform, and we agree on that. But each person is individual. That's why they will teach interpreting and translation in their own way. There are different kinds of teachers. Some of them will be more democratic. Some of them will be more authoritarian. But as for the ratio of, say, the discussion phase of the translation made and the translation itself, we agree on that beforehand. It cannot be different. We agree, for example, that in our classes the priority is given to translation. That's why, in terms of time, the discussion happens during about 15 to 20 minutes during the whole double period that lasts 1 hour and a half. This does not always happen. This does not always happen in any other university or school across the world. Normally, the ratio is just the opposite. We think that lots of people try to argue that this has to be done in a different way, but in practice this is not efficient, because the goal of a translator is to translate as much as possible, to have as much practice as possible. It can be done within a school, but even though it's difficult, if we view the training process not only as the training in the classroom, but take a different view, that we only give the first momentum, the first impulse, and then the rest of for the rest of their life, the translators and interpreters have to learn all the time. The method might contain mistakes, errors, and moreover, we have a lot of invited teachers, at least 15 a year. They will teach with us for a fortnight or a month. They bring their own methods, and in some ways these methods might be contradictory with yours. But on the whole, this launches the process of analytical perception in the would-be translator, and they will only benefit from that. That's why the methodology pluralism parallelism is one of the success factors, as I think. The single method, the single linear method, the Soviet time approach is very inefficient, is greatly inefficient. This is not the case only for the Soviet methods, but it normally prevails across the world. We build from simple to difficult, and then we get the result. But we only get the result if you place someone in the conflict, in the situation of a conflict, where you can choose from different versions, and you have to decide, and you find yourself at a loss, and then you have to find a decision. It's only in this catastrophic situation that a real translator is formed and is developed. The next point is on methodology as well, and it's not it's not typical of today's university life, of today's universities.
In reality, there is an idea that the teacher in the room is somehow intact personality, and it cannot be touched upon in everything concerning his teaching methods and teaching courses cannot be touched upon. When we teach specialists, we do this together. We do this in an efficient and cost-effective way. We need to work not only as a one unit, as one link, but we need that there should be a good monitoring system during the process of education, and that every teacher should control other teachers. The first function is control, mutual control. The second function is teaching and learning from each other. When you see how another person works, you share your experiences and you see what you can do better. It's not a kind of control, but it's a kind of monitoring, a kind of friendly monitoring. And after that you write a review. Visiting lessons of your colleagues is important, because you learn from your colleagues, and there is one more important moment. Teaching translation can be done in different way. You have source language, translation language, and another language. So you have three translation branches. When we teach an interpreter, we have similar tasks for all three branches. For example, you teach how to make notes, translation notes while translating, in order to make consecutive translation afterwards. There is no necessity to teach notes at the lessons of translating from English, German, and Chinese. No, we make an agreement that the teachers of some language take this responsibility to teach notes to students, and the students can do this for all the other languages. There may be other examples. For example, exercises for memorizing numbers. Then can be done only in one language direction. It's not necessary to do it everywhere, because there is actually a differentiation of tasks. A teacher can control this while visiting lessons of other colleagues. The main function, of course, is methodological meetings. It's the main function in the life of a teacher. There are many of them. On Tuesday, I will return to St. Petersburg, and we will have a very important methodological meeting. We are having now forum devoted to economical issues in St. Petersburg, and I have to come there on Tuesday. It's very difficult to make methodological meetings in such times when there are lots of work, but in general we make methodological meetings every week, and it doesn't come only to the issues of bureaucracy. We gather at the round table, we discuss current issues connected with teaching students, we discuss progress issues, and the main task, the main objective for this meeting is the result of monitoring, not only from the teacher's side but from the side of our guests. It results every week in some corrections in the curriculum, and we make changes. We make some changes no matter how small or big they are, but we make them. One more aspect which was very difficult to achieve, because the curriculum is written many times. We try to follow all the external advice of employers who tell us that your graduates cannot cope with the daily norm of written translation in the New York headquarters. Okay, I checked their speeds afterwards, and we include that feature in the learning process. There is one more aspect which I hadn't planned and I hadn't expected during methodological meetings. Every teacher brings the results of his or her creative activity, and he or she presents these results. We go and watch how it is implemented in the course of lessons. For example, we have such an innovation while teaching simultaneous translation. We use paintings of Russian painters, and we have lots of people visiting us and watching such approach. That was an idea of one of our teachers, who later took the responsibility in his hands and tried to implement such methodological activity in the practice of our school. It was very difficult. During the methodological meetings, we have discussions and decide what common topics we have during teaching. We are now going to have such a large meeting, such a big meeting, because there will be a big state exam in June, and we need to make a decision which students should be expelled. Also, for both written and oral translation, we make lists of students who do well and don't do well. Now I'm going to show you part of a letter of one of our teachers, Sergei Yakovlev. I see. This teacher, we constantly get in touch. I forgot to mention that we have an internet portal for teachers and students, where you can see online sessions and online practices. So this is the part of one of his letters after the methodological meeting. It has an enclosure, and in this enclosure you can see an approximate list of conferences. He mentions that there are a number of conferences which took place this year already, and he names such conferences which had taken place already this year. And he mentioned some conferences which will take place later, like crowdsourcing as a source of innovation, like some business conferences, like modern state of oil market, and many others. So there are different names of conferences which will take place, and they all are devoted to different branches of science: pedagogic, physics, navy, innovations, how to make money. What does it mean the conferences took place? After the negotiations, the teachers all together make plan. I will leave my presentation. If somebody wants, you can print it and look. So the teachers make a list of topics for the teachers of simultaneous interpreting to work together and to work in a link. And these are materials of the conferences translated by our teachers. That's why several topics are very strange. And such materials is covered in the form of learning conferences and learning discussions. The most effective methodology is the case methodology. We work according to it. And this methodology is a kind of imitation of theater. That's nothing more than playing the working situation as full as possible. We'll have a lot of such working conferences, not less than 5 in a week per student. We have unilingual conferences according to projects. We have conferences conducted in German or French, and minimum 3 multilingual conferences are provided as well. They are prepared either by students or teachers when the topic is approved and announced. Somebody develops the program of the conference in the language of the conference. Somebody writes it, somebody prepares speeches which may be delivered either by teachers or students or even external guests who are native speakers. They are offered to deliver a speech. I often play the role as a pure customer, and I sit and I listen. Every listener, every teacher who comes to that conference makes his or her own contribution. You know, our teachers are not allowed to conduct more than 2 periods a week each, because they need to work in their own profession. Everybody comes, and the teachers often make a big circle of pure customers at these conferences. They raise their hands and ask questions in different languages. Everything is translated. When we say that it is a consecutive interpreting conference, that's for training. And when we say about simultaneous interpretation conference, everything is done according to a simultaneous interpretation. Some conferences are prepared by students. They are called children conferences. I brought one of the programs of such conference. And the teachers here simultaneously act as students. I have already mentioned that the thing which was mentioned in the point number 10, games for teachers. Maybe you will like it more. Maybe you will like more what Director General of the European Commission does at the seminars. It's necessary for the teacher to improve his or her qualification, and it cannot be stopped. We also have such games as evaluation of taking notes during translation. A speech was delivered and I was chosen.
Of course, we criticized what was done and explained what was wrong and what was right. And this small case, we do not need to expand on it further. We can do a lot. We can make a lot of speeches. But if a teacher works as a professor of translation and interpreting, it's not only that the thing is not that they need to keep improving, but they also need to doubt to question their own quality, and they need to test their own quality. The idea is not to that they have to work not only because they have to have an additional source of income, but because they have to be able to evaluate themselves as being meeting or not meeting the standard of being able to say that, okay, I have passed this test. If they have at least a minute of time, they have to show how they themselves translate. They have to translate together with the other students, and this is a dramatic difference from the conventional status of a university professor who just evaluates what others do. And in conclusion, I'll say that this system is absolutely possible, and I think that universities can afford that. So far as a kind of addendum, a kind of appendix to the main system, but I think at least it's not reasonable to train very many low-quality, low-standards professionals. I think it's more efficient. It's better to train a few of those, but those that will meet high standards. You all keep thinking that, okay, that's St. Petersburg, everything is paid for by the UN and so on, but in fact that's quite the opposite. Nobody pays for that, and everything happens only because people take initiative and they achieve what they have initiated. My key goal is reason, but because to work because it's crazy to work to achieve the goal that will never be achieved. Your goals have to be achievable, and that's it. I've brought books here that I've brought with me to the forum. They have nothing to do with my presentation and the questions that you might ask. These are children's books, Nils with wild geese in Ukrainian. We keep them in our family because my husband's grandma was a translator of these texts, and you're encouraged, you're invited to take them if you need them. They're very rare. They're very rare, so you're welcome. Just very brief questions, please. I'd like to say that tomorrow Irina will be doing a training on training of trainers, and if you want to participate, you can if you want to attend, you can still do that. You can come up to the organizers, and you can attend the training tomorrow and get more detailed instructions and ask all questions that we might not have the time for tomorrow. Okay, I'll leave you.